Hi, thank you for coming. We're joined today by lovely and legendary Monica. And Monica Setziol-Phillips, I have a very brief bio, but I'm guessing you've all probably seen it or have an impression. She's a sculptor, weaver, educator, and also daughter of renowned sculptor Leroy Setziol, and continues a family legacy through her individual voice. So, creating fusions of fiber and wood where the subtractive and additive processes sing together. Monica has been weaving for over 35 years and carving for over 20 years now, which I think those numbers are up to date. Perhaps.
They need to be raised a bit.
I know, I was wondering about that. And
for a long time, that does it.
Has a love of collaboration and community, and I think that's really evident in her zest for teaching and mentoring, which she continues to offer and do. And also makes significant contributions to arts and culture in various ways, including being a board member at the Arts Conspiracy, which is a nonprofit based in the West Valley that focuses on providing art opportunities for young people, primarily, and is a board member on the Yamhill County Cultural Coalition.
I was.
Okay, I was wondering.
But I'm on another board, so
yeah.
that's okay.
So, yeah, I think we're just going to have sort of an organic conversation and let Monica kind of lead the way. But I was imagining just starting by like briefly touching on what your upbringing was like in creativity for you in your childhood.
A lot of play.
Yeah. A lot of play.
No, we made a big, well, let's see, where to start. I think you have to start when there was a shift. And you know, I don't know if I can sit down. Oh no, the whole time. I'm sorry. I have to stand up. When we moved to Oregon, we moved here because my mother got a job here, and she got a job teaching Chinese and Japanese children at a mission church, Holt Memorial Chinese Presbyterian Church, down in Skid Row. And my father decided to give up the ministry, and he wanted to try his hand at wood. He had done some wood carving, really wood whittling, I would say, when he was a chaplain with the U.S. Army in Japan toward the end of World War II. And he had it with the ministry. And so he wanted to do wood, and my mother supported him, and so he had no income. The wood that he was mostly scrap wood that he found. There was no money to buy wood, and his work was all small. And we were quite poor. We lived in for several years in some really, really ratty places. Storefronts both times, one on Woodstock and the other on 82nd and Ramona. And there were rats in the walls and old linoleum. I mean, it was, but we survived, you know? And I think because we moved quite a bit, that had the influence on both my brother and myself of making us probably more inward, because it would seem like we would be in a school, we would just make friends, and then bam, we'd be moving again. So you rely more on yourself, I think, that way. And so from a very early age, we didn't have much. But for me, I was going to say, you know, I also do paper cuts. And so I was a paper cut artist first, because we always had paper and glue and pencils and watercolor, you know, those old praying watercolor paints that the kids have. And then things started to change when we moved from the east side to the west side, and my parents were finally able to borrow enough money for a down payment on a house. So we had a house, and then he also got down payment from some other friend, I don't remember at the time, to have a shop. And that's when he was able to do bigger work, better work. The transformation was considerable for him because his early work was largely religious. One of his early promoters was Jim Hunt, who was the owner of the Catholic bookstore. And I remember his friend, my dad's very first show was on the lawn of Agnes Prentice's home in Eastmoreland. And I remember Agnes because she always called me Dolores. And I would say, my name is Monica, and she's like, well, Dolores. But so that was his very first show, and because of that show, he did get a few commissions for carving Madonnas and some religious-oriented things. And it wasn't until the early 60s that he made that shift where he actually became a wood sculptor and got into abstract work. Those were very important years. We still didn't have much, but there were important years for his formation of who he became as an artist. And he was very good at scavenging, and so he got bigger pieces of wood. And then as he started to sell, he was able to buy more good wood. And I remember I was in high school, and he wasn't getting enough work to support the family by any means. And so I had to type. He decided to approach architects. So I had to type these letters on, to architects out of the phone book. And we sent them out, and one architect responded, and that was George Wolfe. And that was the firm Wolfe Zimmer, which became then Wolfe Zimmer, Gunzel and Frasca, and it's still a very big firm. And so George Wolfe was very formative for my father because he gave him some good commissions. And then it was through George that he became better known among architects, and that's how John Storrs became aware of his work. And it was John Storrs who brought John Gray to my dad's shop, 3630 Southwest Corbett, and that's how the Salishan Commission, for those of you who know my father's panels, that's how that whole thing came into being. And that's when his career finally took off. But that's from 1951 to 1965, that all those years to build up to be able to go forward like that. And then when I was in college, shifting to my development, I was a senior. I was a foreign language and international relations person. That's what my degree is in. And I had some hours that I could do anything I wanted with, which was just amazing. So I said, I'm either going to take weaving or ceramics. Mm-hmm. And I wanted ceramics because Ray Grimm was a friend of the family. But ceramics didn't fit in my schedule, and weaving did. So I took weaving from a woman named Solange Cohort, who was a pretty well-known weaver at the time, and I was hooked. I really was hooked. So much so that the janitor, I would go back after class in those days. Well, now in colleges and universities, you're lucky if you find a weaving department, because it's not financially viable, because you have to have so many dollars per square foot And looms take up, you can only have one person to a loom. So that's why a lot of, because a lot of places, Portland State had a good one, Lewis and Clark had a good one, Oregon State still has some, but not what they had. So weaving had a really tough time. But anyway, so I was really, really hooked on weaving, and pretty soon the janitor would come around and say, I'm really supposed to lock up. And so then you basically kicked me out. But anyway, so those were very, very important years to me, and I did a lot of experimenting from the beginning. And I think that's a critical factor in the development of an artist, by the way. You have to be really intrigued with exploring and experimenting. And the other part of that goes with you have to be willing to fail and then just try again or try something else. So by the time I graduated, I was really heavy into weaving. But I went into the Peace Corps, and then when I came back, and that was really wonderful because although I was in Central America, but I was in El Salvador, and you probably know, I don't know, you probably know how the Spaniards came in and disrupted, blew away many, many indigenous Indians. Well, in El Salvador, it was 90%. There are almost no indigenous native peoples in El Salvador. But I did get to go to Guatemala, and that was just wonderful. And especially in those days, which was mid-60s, they had, the big tourism hadn't come in yet. So I got to really see the weavers, and they were very skeptical. I bought a gorgeous huipil, but she didn't want to sell it to me for quite a while. It was in a village market in Chichicastenango, and I said, but I really, really want. And finally I came back to her. She said no. Twice she said no, and finally I came back, but she said, I'm a weaver. I really know what you have to do this. And she said, finally she let me buy it. So that was a very important part of my process. So then when I came back home, my parents bought me a loom, and that's when I started to be seriously involved in weaving. I had to have a job, so I taught German at North Catholic High School, but that ended when the school burned down. And then I had made friends with Betty Gray, who was a very important person in my life. And she's the one, she was taking weaving at the Old School of Arts and Crafts. So I started teaching there. And I had a very different approach than Lori Herrick, who was a wonderful, I bet you, I don't know how many of you know at all, but when Lori Herrick was at the Old School of Arts and Crafts, we had the biggest weaving department on the West Coast, period. And that all came to a halt when they built the new College of Arts and Crafts, which was I won't even go into that because I have very strong feelings in that area. But and then by then, I was connected to my husband, and he had moved to the Bay Area for the opportunities. Portland didn't have much of a theater scene, and the only real viable close theater scene was in San Francisco. So he moved there, and then I moved there to join him and did some weaving there. And then in end of 86, 87, he went to Ashland because he became an actor with Oregon Shakes. And my parents had moved to Sheridan, so I moved to Sheridan to be able to take care of my mom and commuted to Ashland whenever I could. And that's when I became an artist or a craftsperson, or whatever. That's when I started putting wood and weaving together. And some of you have heard this before because it's my favorite quote from Albert Einstein. He said, "If you are patient, there may come that day when suddenly While eating an apple, the solution politely presents itself and says, "Here I am." And that's what happened to me. For me, a very creative time is just before I go to sleep. And I was falling to sleep, and all of a sudden I could see the two together. Before that, I had carved I got into carving because of my father's scraps. I would carve some sticks to hang my weavings from. I would carve some sticks to put into my weavings. And so I was ready to move on, I think. So that's when I first started seriously combining fibers and wood carving. And it's continued to inspire me and open new possibilities because I love color. And so I can delve into color of all the yarns, and then I love wood, so I inherited that. And that's an interesting thing. We don't know much about our Polish. My father was full Polish. We don't know anything about his ancestors, but I bet you there's got to be a wood connection there somewhere, because it's a strong connection in our family. And then on my mother's side, I have a wood connection. But you know what? Because I have a forester, I have a great-great-great-grandfather who was a forester in Germany. I have a wagon maker and a furniture maker, all on my mother's side of the family. We don't, but realize what's missing. We don't know anything about the women. The women were not recorded, but the men were recorded. So I'm sure there's some fibers there somewhere. And I think I think my passion for teaching started when I started teaching at the Old School of Arts and Crafts, because I really love working with people, and I see myself as a guide. And I've been teaching now at Sitka, for 15 years, which amazes me. But what's wonderful is to get people to find the ability in themselves to discover what they can do. And so that's my passion now. One other than my own work, my passion is to enable kids and adults, and I'm very much interested in building a continuum, because I think I've been heading up an summer arts program for kids for many years. And we're very good at doing that. There are art programs for kids. And then you have to wait, boing. Oh, he's retired. Let's find something to do. But there should really be a continuum. And in villages in the past, that's what there was, Fathers and mothers handed down their crafts to their kids. And then their kids grew up and did the same. And everybody in the village, practically everybody in the village, participated in some form of craft. So I think we need more weavers, we need more carvers, we need more potters, we need more everything. And it's because one of the most important ingredients that the craft has is there's what you give the craft, but there's what the craft gives you. And that's a very special place to be, because when you are involved in your work, there's a connection that happens there that doesn't happen any other way. And you are at one with your material, and you are totally in that space for that precious amount of time. So it is really a very important place to be able to be. And my personal feeling is that we would have many more people who felt fulfilled and looked positively toward the future if they were involved in some form of creativity. Because we're all born with creative energy, and all you have to do is watch kids play to know that it's there. And somehow it gets squashed, you know. And that's what we have to fight to keep alive. We have to fight to have and it's in all forms, you know. I mean, you can I don't care if you're a craftsman or an artist. Some people don't want to be called one or the other. If you're a craftsman, now when we lived in the Bay Area, there was a very, very fine graphic artist named David Lance-Goins. And he had an interview, and they asked him, did he consider himself an artist? And he said, no, I'm a craftsman. Because anybody can say they're an artist, but you have to prove you're a craftsman. And that's true to a very large degree. You know, craft is built upon your skills, but craft is involved in all the arts. But so that would be a very interesting panel discussion at some point. I don't see, if you are familiar with A.K. Kumarasamy, who was the very, very important curator of the Oriental collection of the Boston Museum years ago. He wrote some very, very important papers. And when you look at art and craft, they both mean the same thing. They both have to do with what you do with your hands. They both have to do with, as Kumarasamy's definition was, that which is well and truly made. So if your work is well made and truly made, then you can be both, you know. So I don't see that as being something one should get hung up on. I do believe that craftsmen have more work to do. I think people involved in craft realize that there's a period of hard work. Well, there's a period of work in any creativity, but there seems to be maybe a longer period that you are involved in the learning of the hands to the materials. You know, my students know that there's a very ancient, from 1200s, tale of Chuang Tzu, who talks about a carpenter, and the carpenter, he has created such a beautiful table that the king wants to know, what's the nature of that table that you built? And he said, well, there really isn't anything, but this is what I do. And so he goes through his process for making this beautiful table. And what he does is he has to have the right tools. He has to think about what his teachers gave him. He has to rid himself of all thought about remuneration or any kind of fame or anything to be gained. And then he goes into the woods, and he makes sure he has a sharp tool, and he looks for the tree that is waiting to become his table, and he says, what have I for you, and what have you for me? And that's very much, that connection is a very, very, I don't want to say sacred, but it's a very special place to be, to realize that you are responsible to what you're creating. There's an area there of responsibility. It's not just like doing any old thing. And that's what, in the end, the king says, but I can't look at anybody else's table like your table. It's magic to me. Mm-hmm. And the carpenter says, Your Majesty, what you call magic comes only from what I have already told you. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a beautiful, beautiful tale. So that's kind of my world. My world is creating and hopefully bringing along other people to create, to realize the value of being involved in the creative process. So, of course, I would encourage all of you to become involved in some form of creative expression that gives depth to your lives. So, that's it. Do you have any questions?
I'm just like washed over with how rich that was and colorful, and I just feel so grateful as an artist, and I know there's so many artists in this room, students of yours and craftspeople, that I can just feel this like sinking in for a long time. So I'm very happy to be here for this. I feel like it's, I just have a few follow-up questions, I guess, and we can definitely chat as an audience as well. But just to hear for your whole life basically, like how integrated creativity was, and how welcome that process of expression was in your family. And it's just beautiful to hear about that, how it feels so fluid, that you just kind of found your way into working with your hands in these various ways.
Yeah,
and then
just
teaching.
One thing leads to another.
Yeah, so your family was supportive of it, clearly.
Yes, I would say so. They were, but not outright.
Mm-hmm.
It was more that the opportunity was there. I could use my dad's tools. I could use his scraps of wood, and one thing kind of led to another. But they were not big. Other than that, they weren't what you would call a big supporter, except that they did buy some of my work early on, which was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't ever. I don't ever remember either my father or mother saying, "This is really a wonderful piece." That just didn't happen. So, yeah.
Yeah, which that can be kind of complex, that can be hard for being a child and hearing those qualifiers, and then
My personal feeling is that I had a very independent streak from a very early age.
Yeah. How was that to see your father's kind of rise into recognition and form his
It opened. I think it opened up.
For you.
It opened up another world for him, but also through him for my brother and for me.
Yeah, that's what I wonder how it was for you.
Very
too.
definitely, because you met different people, and there isn't. It's like a continuum, because you can't say there's any specific. It just kind of all transpired. I don't think you're ever aware this is an aha moment type thing.
Yeah, exactly. That makes sense.
But it did, and I'm grateful to my parents for letting me sort of progress and grow on my own.
Yeah, it seems very organic.
Yeah.
And then, like, in regards to the material, you were talking a lot about the material and kind of respecting it and listening to it. And I'm curious how your compositions get made. Like, do you map them? Does the material tell you what it wants to be?
My dad was very spontaneous, I would say. I don't, because I have to use my arms up. My dad was very spontaneous, and he would take a piece of wood and he would, in chalk, sketch out what he planned, roughly sketch out. And then he would start to work. And like on a grid, he would lay out the basic grid form, but then not what happened within that grid. And that sort of developed organically. When I got to doing wooden weaving pieces, I can't do that because I have to know how wide does the weaving have to be and how is it going to fit into the design of the wood. So I do quite a bit of sketching because I want the pieces to relate. And so I have to say, I have to know, well, I have to start out with how big is the piece going to be, and then what's the ratio of weaving to wood, and those are the primary things, and then you start to build out from there. How's one going to relate to the other?
Do you do them both simultaneously,
No.
or does one come before?
The weaving has to be done first,
Yeah.
because you see, there's this all has to be, there's wood behind that has to be removed so that the weaving can fit into it. So I have to have that weaving done and completed so that I can measure on the wood where those cuts need to be made to fit it in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how much time, I mean, the two pieces here, how much time would it take to do this one? And do you have an idea how much time it would take you to carve it out?
He was very fast. He was, I mean, you wouldn't believe how prolific my dad was. We have, of his smaller pieces, there must be hundreds of them out there. Of his bigger work, obviously, not so much. But I met a woman, there's a woman who, I don't know if she's still alive, but she had a fabulous door of my father's that's carved on both sides. And she said, and it took him 4 years to do this. And I said to myself, my dad never took 4 years to do anything. So, I mean, he was very, very fast.
That's my impression, yeah, that weaving is so slow.
Yes, weaving is
comparatively.
not fast. Because first you have to set up the loom. In order to be able to set up the loom, you have to get the warp onto the loom. Then you have to thread the loom. You have to tie it on.
Well, then he did the Kaiser Permanente, where those are like 260 4x8 panels, and he did that in less than 2 years.
Yes, that's right.
That's a lot of panels.
Well, he said he dedicated his wrists to Kaiser Permanente.
That's funny.
Yeah,
that's
because,
perfect.
But now that was yellow cedar, which carves pretty fast. But yeah, he just whipped them out. Except I will say that I have 2 of those panels that I did. But anyway.
With like the imagery in your work, does it come to you in a dream or in a liminal state as well? Or
it comes in a visual, yes. Visualization is really important, very definitely. And then I always let myself have color play. And that's the tricky part about weaving, because you see a skein, and a skein absorbs light differently than a finished piece of weaving. So you look at this skein, oh, I got this color, this color, this color, this color, and you think, these are going to be great. And then you weave them, and you lay that other color in, and you say, this isn't going to work. So then you get to unweave and find the right color that has to go in there. So it's interesting, the tricks that light plays on you, and where you look at the colors in the light. You know, you don't want to choose colors under artificial light. That's a really big mistake. So you have to be sure that you have good natural light to choose your colors.
What medium do you use to adhere the weaving to your wood?
That was a brilliant discovery. Because at first I sewed a backing onto the weaving, and I put grommets in it, and I laced one to the other on the back side, which was laborious and not terribly effective. And then I discovered Velcro. Because I want the piece needs to be removable. I mean, I could tack it on the back, but it needs to be removable for 2 reasons. One, it might need to be cleaned. And 2, a panel will need at some point to be re-oiled, and you cannot re-oil it with the weaving on it.
Yeah, that's so
So it has to be removable. Yeah.
I'm wondering about your mother's impact on your creative life. We've heard a lot of really wonderful things about your father's impact, but I'm wondering.
That's right. My mother doesn't get enough credit, and she deserves a lot of credit. One, for putting up with my father, and two, for holding the family together, which she absolutely did. She was a very creative person. She was, and sometimes I only have two of her paintings, but she grew up in India, my mother did. My grandparents had a mission in the central provinces, and my grandmother ran a leprosarium. My grandfather was an amazing man because he was fluent in Hindi. He became fluent. He could read and write Hindi beautifully. And she went to school in Darjeeling. They had to go to British boarding school because that's the only option they had. So they went to British boarding school up in Darjeeling, and she took painting, and she did two amazing paintings when she was 12 years old that I have. And my brother has one, so three paintings altogether. And she was a kindergarten teacher, so maybe that's where my love of teaching comes. And she loved little children, and she would make all kinds of stuffed creatures that would illustrate stories. So she had the 5 Chinese brothers, and she made the 5 Chinese brothers with their pigtails, and she made Winnie the Pooh, and she made a whole bunch of different animals like that. Yeah, so she was a very creative, very loving woman.
Can we hear a little bit more about you and how teaching and mentorship has influenced your creative world, or vice versa?
Well, because it opens you up. You know, when you are making suggestions to somebody else about a direction they might take, then that kind of opens you up as to directions you might want to take. So one feeds the other, and they kind of interweave, you know. So.
And I know that there are some of your students in this room, and
2 students here.
Is there just 2? Raise your hands if you've taken a class or been
No,
Monica's
just
student. Or
the 3 of them.
3.
Oh, and Lynn.
Yes.
So 3.
3.
Yeah. 3 carvers.
That's
no
just
weavers.
amazing. If anyone's called to share a little about your experience.
And Tim, well,
Adam, your work is clearly that following a bit of an influence here of the Setziol. That's why I made a point to kind of display the work together with the cross-cutting and intuitive kind of filling in of the grid, but within, again, your own style and a bit more minimal. And
well, very early he began to make his own discoveries.
Yeah.
Well, I got a little story about learning from Monica. I'll stand up too. I was at her studio in Sheridan, and she was, I was working on a practice board that she had instructed me on. And then there was one thing, it was like doing a pyramid. And I'd watched videos of her father doing work on, I forget what it was, but I kind of got a sense of him and his humor and all. And I heard her, she's like just talking me through it. She's like, okay, you do this step, you do this step, and then the pyramid will appear.
I love it.
Like, oh yeah, I'll trust you on this. So I'm working away on my practice board. She's over working on her carving, and I hear this chuckle, and it just keeps getting louder. And I'm like, and she's like, "It's a pyramid, isn't it?" And I was like, I just had this like deja vu of like watching the videos, and I was like, oh, that's her father's laugh, and it was just like very full, and it filled the studio, and it made me feel like she was like over there working on her carving, but thinking about my experience. And so
I love that. It's just like I'm feeling so emotional, like with this. I am 8 months pregnant, but this is just such an inspiring talk, and just to hear the rippling out and within, and just it's so wonderful.
Well, it's wonderful to be able to share ideas and feelings. And, you know, I mean, the arts are, being part of the arts is a very emotional thing. And so you get very excited about what you're doing and you want other people to have that experience. So that's, yeah.
I would say I've taken 2 classes from Monica. I'm not. There's nothing secret. You, like some artists hold things back.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not gonna tell you. There are no secrets with Monica. She will tell you any question you ask. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it. But there are no secrets. If you want to use virtual, I use direct. Here you go. But nothing is secret. Here you are. Let me help you to build something.
Well, that's it. That's why I say I'm a guide. I like to be able to show people possibilities, but then it's up to you to develop those possibilities. Oh, and I got to tell you about one student I had. I had a student, this was fairly early on at Sitka, and she came in and she had a design all worked out. And I said, well, you know, that's going to be, this is a bas-relief class, and this is going to be, it was a nautical design. And she put it on the wood, and she started, and she didn't go more than about 1/4 of an inch deep. And I said, well, you really might want to consider doing something else here. And she said, oh no, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. And the way she said it was just like that. And I thought, okay. So she finished in record time because she wasn't really learning anything. She was just trying to execute her design. So I gave her another piece of wood and I said, okay, now I want you to just do whatever you feel like doing. And she banged the heck out of that piece of wood. But she said, this is great. So I was glad that she had the opportunity to open up and really experience that. But mostly, you know, people are tentative at first. And to get them to know, oh, I'll tell you another one about a pyramid. This student was building a pyramid and he lopped the top off. And he said, oh no, now what do I do? And I said, now you get to do something else. And he was so relieved because he hadn't ruined the piece. You know, he just opened up another possibility. So
I love that.
So
That's such an amazing way of thinking, just with creative process. And woodworking, I'm feeling like an impression that it's just so democratic in a way, just utilizing scrap and a knife, you know, and just kind of encourage.
well, a gouge. But
Okay, sorry.
spoon carving is
No.
not.
Just it's so encouraging.
It is. Well,
Yeah.
that's why you should all partake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, we can open it up for more questions if anyone wants to jump in.
I just was wondering, how long have you been teaching at Sitka?
15 years. Yeah, 15 years. Yeah. It's been a really wonderful experience. Yeah.
So, when your parents bought your first pieces there,
Uh-huh.
how did you establish a fair value?
How did I? I'm sorry.
How did you establish a fair value on those pieces with them?
Oh, well, they bought them out of a show.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Mm.
So they had to pay fair market value. And the gallery got their share, which is fair. Yeah. The first piece I bought, wasn't able to buy many pieces of my dad, but I bought one piece of my dad's, and it was pretty funny because it was in Corvallis at the art center there.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother came up to me afterwards. She said, I was going to buy that piece. She didn't know I bought it. I was going to buy that piece, and somebody else went and bought it. And she was quite perturbed that I had to tell her, I'm the one. Well, it's been a great pleasure to be here and to share some time with you and some thoughts. And Thank you very much.
Thank you.